What follows are a set of tips or strategies that are really for myself. Some might be obvious, some might be common sense. Some of these I just have to keep reminding myself to follow. But like in all survival advice, the ideal scenario is one where you are not in need of survival advice. So I'm sharing them with you in hopes that you will not need them. The first and most important tip I feel is advice given to me by my lead at Epic, who I believe learned it from his old lead, Don Vecca, and that is make a sound. The temptation is to wait until some element is complete, an animation or environment or a visual effect or the timing on a cinematic, but don't wait. Don't wait. Put sound in the game with the least amount of implementation effort needed. I don't mean create a system, I mean stand up the most basic sound execution with the least amount of work. Yeah, in all likelihood, you'll need to replace that work. But when you're doing your production cost analysis, realizing that you don't have time to revisit a lower priority area of the project, having already completed a make a sound pass might mean the difference between having something and having silence. As early on in the development as possible, frame the relationship between audio and the rest of the team as a collaboration rather than providing a service. A collaborator has a voice in the room. They're part of the discussion process and part of the feedback loop for iterative development. When I collaborate with a designer or a tech artist or an animator, I am their equal. A partner in pushing forward and selling the vision of the whole product. I work where they work. I am plugged into their development spaces, their scripts, and their tools. And my work feeds into theirs and theirs back into mine. When I do this successfully, we discover a mutual excitement over the process and end result. Sometimes, when it's a big team, I have to sell this idea multiple times over to many different people in many different departments because they're so accustomed to audio being an external part of the development process. When audio is a service, it only reacts to requests. It's always behind in the development and is often subordinate to the whims of non-audio people, sometimes for the worse. Collaboration, in my experience, has almost always yielded better results. You don't have a lot of time, and pivoting when most work is completed is a disaster and only exacerbates short timelines or results in a painfully subpar or confused final product. So establish an early feedback cycle with stakeholders. You need to determine aesthetic requirements immediately, and sometimes non-audio directors cannot meaningfully provide direction until they have heard something to which they can respond. Take advantage of temp audio and paintovers as pre-production concept work to get feedback on ideas before even creating anything. For those of you worried about temp love, just frame these temps or paintovers as exactly what they are, concept work, or initial designs or ideas for the final product and not the actual product. Once you have buy-in on any individual design element of the paintover, replace your Make a Sound Pass versions with that. You will hopefully establish strong aesthetic direction in a very short period. If you go into a review meeting or a feedback session with no direction for your stakeholders, especially non-audio stakeholders, they will often flail about trying to find something to say and will usually pick out things that you're already aware of. You don't want them spinning their wheels or nickel and diming points of feedback or missing pieces or work that hasn't been completed. Your goal in that session is to have them sign off on the production elements in question so that you can move on to the next block of work. So for a review meeting, you should have a concise bullet point list of items you want your director or stakeholder to review, and you should have clear directions on what form their feedback should take. If a request for a revision is made, you want to determine the best course of action that will meet the needs of the request with as little additional work as possible. As you near the end of the production timeline and deadlines loom, the response will increasingly become a negotiation of the final result, where end-of-the-line deal breakers just get cut out entirely. In modern storytelling traditions, almost all plot arises from motivated conflict. Progress in the narrative is impeded by something or someone, and overcoming or failing to overcome that impediment is how we progress the narrative forward. Likewise, in most game scenarios, the player or user is attempting to progress forward through some objective and is impeded by something or someone which they will need to overcome to succeed in the scenario, usually. Identifying these points of conflict will help you prioritize sound production and music attention. Depending on how dire your timeline is, you may not be able to give sound to everything in the game, so you need to be clear on what parts of the experience need sound attention the most. Additionally, set pieces are often the reward for succeeding, and sometimes productions are actually focused around set pieces with a loose narrative providing connective tissue between them. In most of these cases, you will need to acknowledge the set piece with sound and music treatment. Prioritize sounds that are direct results of player input. This might be button clicks in the menu or UI, or player character movement or weapons fire and impacts. In any case, these are the experiences the player is most keyed into, and as such, sit very high on the priority scale. Neglecting these will always feel like something is missing or broken, which is usually a deal breaker, no matter how little time remains on the production. Backgrounds are probably the easiest and fastest way forward, establishing a wall-to-wall soundscape, ensuring there is no awkward digital silence in any part of your project. Additionally, a well-designed background can bear the weight of an entire game world on its shoulders, bringing to life an otherwise empty or lifeless world. This could be a diegetic sound environment, or it could be background music. Regardless of the approach or design, this is one of those production elements that should not be neglected or ignored, since no other element will give you quite as much bang for your buck. And finally, this is all to say, to focus on what's important. Sometimes in reviews or dailies, the peanut gallery will pick apart the work in progress and will ask to hear more of this or that or the other thing. If you followed all the requests, everything would be too loud and the mix would be a disaster. If there's a legitimate confusion, of course, about what the focus should be, then that needs to be clarified immediately. On the other hand, it may actually become your job to push back on those requests as an audio expert with insight, not only on the best possible presentation, but also insight on the constraints of your production. However, if you decide to push back, you need to have a very well-reasoned argument. So at any given point in the game experience, you will need to have a clear and concise idea about what sounds are important and which are not. When designing systems on a short time scale, you will need to keep your solutions as simple as possible, and this is for many reasons. Firstly, you do not have a lot of time to develop or test larger scale or complex systems. Keeping your solutions short and simple will reduce the lead-in time for you or your sound designers to actually begin working and using your system. Additionally, complex or convoluted systems designs tend to be more error-prone, especially break if changes occur around them, like maybe other people are working in that script. Lastly, if something happens and the person who implemented the system is no longer with the project or the company, a set of smaller, simple systems will be easier for a new person to maintain and repair without needing to sink time into learning how they function. As you build out your solutions, focus on an implementation experience that allows you and your other designers to make quick and easy changes to your implementation. This may mean embracing a spreadsheet or a simple data asset, where making adjustments to the implementation is as simple as tweaking a parameter on a cell or a detail list, or even editing a text file. So with this in mind, be considerate about your data layout and organization. It should make sense. While it may be faster to quickly plug in a slapdash system that takes advantage of existing gameplay architecture or designs, to piggyback, so to speak, off of systems, if you can spend just a little extra time to create more generic systems that are usable across many types of projects, then you can begin saving your own time in the future. It might not feel like a production win now, but the return on investment could be huge. It can also put you in a unique position to expand or enhance systems later on. VFX artists are in a similar boat to audio artists. A lot of their work follows like a waterfall after design, 3D art, animation, etc. But because they're part of the visual presentation of the project, they tend to be more plugged into the changes in direction and are also prototyping and iterating before implementing. I will often lurk in my project's art and VFX channels to see if I can spot any incoming work. Sometimes, if I'm lucky, I will see work in progress video maybe a week before it hits the depot. Take risks only when it's worth it. Be wary of taking risks. Risks can create the potential for additional work, and sometimes, depending on the type of risk, emergency or crunch work. So with this in mind, you will want to be judicious about the return on investment for any risks you might undertake, and you want to acknowledge those who might suffer from the risks and seek their buy-in or support for the undertaking. Projects always have more ambition than time or resources to realize them. So you need to be adaptable and you need to be able to let go, to not get attached to works in progress, even really cool works in progress. I have made whole working music systems that didn't get used. You just have to roll with it and keep moving forward. Ultimately, all that matters is landing that delivery deadline. If you are struggling or facing the impossible, ask for help. The earlier you can scope the need for help, the better. And if there's actually a chance of getting you help, getting them earlier is better. But don't suffer in silence. If you are being put in a situation where you're being tasked to do impossible things, and after requesting help, they refuse your request or refuse to change the scope of work, then you need to get out of there. Yes, there are many systems which support simulating certain aspects, say like sound propagation and worldization, but you don't need to use them for everything. If it's faster to just bake that into a stereo file or a surround file or even a binaural file and fake it entirely, do that. This is entertainment. It's a magic show. Nothing is real. Use any and every trick you can to sell the whole experience, even smoke and mirrors. On tight deadlines and crunchy projects, anxiety to deliver is high across all teams. What I have found is that projecting a level of assuring confidence can help reduce any anxiety stakeholders might be feeling. It makes them feel like you are capable of handling things. With that said, it's also important to be realistic about what's possible and what's needed to succeed. Be real when scaling expectations, but find ways to assure the primary experience or golden path has been prioritized effectively. At the end of the day, stakeholders and team leads need to trust in your ability to handle this project competently. Producers are an essential component of development management and communication, especially on projects with short deadlines. A solid producer will handle scheduling meetings, help manage features and bug priorities, assist in communications between teams, keep the team posted on changes or shifts in production schedules, manage JIRAs, take notes at meetings, and in rare cases, can even proxy on certain types of meetings. All of that takes time and requires constant overhead from individual contributors. Being able to trust someone else in that work is huge for keeping the team productive and the output high. When scheduling out your milestones, it's important to account for the uncertainty of development. If you have a high-level experience informing your time estimates, great. But if not, you'll want to build in a margin of error that gets wider with the less experience you have in that area. Work will keep you busy, but don't let communication drop away. You should have regular status check-ins with related team members. You should have a sense of what everyone is working on at any given time. And your producer should always know what you're working on, what your status is, and what is prioritized next. Not only so that there's visibility with your work across the team, but also because they will need to be able to communicate the progress of your team to other teams. Please, please, please be kind to yourself. Depending on your situation, you might be the only person in the world that can count on you to look out for you. There will always be more and more demands on your time, your energy, your mental and emotional bandwidth, and I'm telling you, it is critical that you always leave some amount of that bandwidth for you, for yourself. Sleep is essential to your critical faculties, and so it's really important that you're ensuring you have set time aside for rest. But so too is play and creativity. I recommend finding some kind of creative outlet that you can engage in during a slotted time. Maybe you're off time, maybe you have that time, or making time for it. Something that's not work, something that's nothing like your work, away from your computer or workstation. For me, drawing and painting and cooking are outlets that have saved me from burning out when I have literally hated music and sound. It keeps me away from the computer, engages my body with different kinds of movement, and it taps into different parts of my mind while still being very creative. I will never forget Ben Crossbones telling me about his time crunching at Neversoft and his lucid realization that he was killing himself for a toy. I think about that every single time I'm in a crunch cycle. Yeah, there can be a lot of money or an investment going into these products, but let's be serious. This is a piece of entertainment, a toy, a triviality. The world will be just as it was before after its release, regardless of what your executives or directors insist to their investors. Your life, your family, your health are all far more important than a video game. Yes, many extremely successful people in the entertainment industry have sacrificed those things in the pursuit of their work. I have met these people. They are terrible people. it's not worth the sacrifice. Finally, and probably the cheesiest aphorism that I'm offering today, is this: life is short, and for many of us, it will be way shorter than we want it to be. How you spend your time every day is how you will have spent your life. Is this how you will have wanted to spend your life? Is this what you want to look back on? Your time has limited value to your employer, but your time is invaluable to yourself. When you sacrifice your own time for other people's goals and visions and products, you are losing something precious only to yourself and those who love you. So treat your time with care and handle it like you will never see it again. Make sure when you sacrifice your time that the people who get that are truly deserving. And finally, I thank you all for your attention in this brief time we spent together. I hope that I have been deserving of your time. Thank you.